Coming up on the ACSA legislative lunch break, we will bring you all of your latest news and information from the state capitol and CDE with an in-depth analysis on how it impacts your school community. Early voting is already underway here in the state of California and other states across the country. What does this mean for California public education in election 2022? We'll talk with experts in the field about what you need to know about the November 2022 elections. The ACSA legislative lunch break starts right now. And it's a couple of minutes after 1 o'clock. We welcome you on a Wednesday to the ACSA legislative lunch break. I'm Naj Alikhan, ACSA's Senior Director of Marketing and Communications. Welcome. Go ahead and jump onto our chat and say hello. Let us know where you're watching from today. We are joined today by a special guest host, Edgar, on assignment today. So let's go ahead and bring in our special guest host today, ACSA's legislative advocate, Diana Vu, with us today. Diana, how are you?
Good. Thank you for having me. I know I'm not Edgar, but hopefully people still enjoy the show.
I have no doubt that people will still enjoy the show. Perhaps they'll enjoy it more since Edgar is on assignment. We'll see how that goes. Jared Hungerford first on our chat today. Hello, Jared. Mark Campbell, Jessica Doors, Heather Armelino as well. So good to see all of you. Diana and I and Edgar were in Burbank last week. Hello, Burbank, for our ACSA governance meetings. Diana, you had a chance to meet with members on Wednesday, and then you were part of the very first presentation on Thursday. I have to ask you, you see members fairly often, but this was an opportunity to interact with so many more. What's that experience like for you? How great was it to see all of those members?
Oh, it's amazing. It's just absolutely amazing to see somebody, to see everybody and not little these boxes or screens, to see them in person, to hear their stories, everything they're doing for students right now. I'm just incredibly impressed by all of you every single day.
Yeah, and a reminder, our show is live and interactive, so you can go ahead and jump into the chat again and say hello. We have a couple of guests coming on a little bit later on in the show to talk about the November 2022 election. What you need to know about the candidates who support public education, and what initiatives will make the most impact on California public education. That's coming up. Diana, I wanted to hit a story, and this is going to really hit home for some of our school administrators, and I'll get your feedback in just a moment. But we did have a story that was reported to us this week by KCRA TV, the NBC affiliate, in Sacramento. This is an assault on a school administrator. In this case, a high school principal. Let me read you the details of this. The principal at Lyndhurst High School was assaulted in his office by a parent. According to KCRA, there was a fight off school grounds involving several teenagers. One of the teens had to go to the hospital for treatment. The next day, following the fight, the parents of the injured teenager allegedly went to the school, went into the office of the principal, and then began assaulting him. Authorities, according to KCRA, arrested one parent. The other left the school grounds. Upon securing a search warrant, the deputies searched the couple's home and found a self-made firearm, what many of us call a ghost gun, no serial number, which was brought onto school grounds. Both parents are facing an extensive list of charges. Diana, I think that I think what we've been hearing feedback-wise is from school administrators is that the kids in the classroom, happy to be there, very engaged, but the big challenge for school administrators really is happening outside of the classroom. And the discussions that you have, not just like at our governance meetings last week, but when you travel from around the state, what kind of feedback are you getting about the challenges that our school administrators are facing as we move past the pandemic and into, what could be described as a normal school year?
Yeah, absolutely. Stories like this just are really just frustrating right now, really just frustrating completely, because all educators want to do is support students. And this principal supported these students even throughout this fight and argument. And so it's hard to see. And what we've heard from the field over and over again is that that COVID has taken a toll on not just students, but educators, and the mental health that has still come with it is difficult. They're all just burnt out right now. They have so much to take on while trying to help students and take care of themselves. And that they really need support too. And we really need to focus on them and making sure that in order for them to support students, we need to support the staff and educators first. It's just frustrating to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I know that you've been focusing a lot on the assessments, the California School Dashboard, the information that's going to be coming out in December. We're seeing a lot more coverage on the assessments. Just from your experience, from the work you're doing as far as the California School Dashboard, this data assessment that's coming out, is there one thing that our members need to know right now as we head into that release of the data? Something that you could tell them, as they prepare for that data to go out on public release?
Yeah, so I would say every district has their data right now. Dig deep into it. Figure out what those stories are. Is this a one-time blimp because of COVID, because of all the quarantines and how it looks? Because it's not just assessment data, it's all of it. All the data combined makes our accountability system and the dashboard. Figure out why it looks like this. We all know that it has been a difficult couple of years right now. Let's remind folks, everyone has kind of a short memory right now, and figure out like, hey, this is not just your district. This is happening statewide. This is the new baseline for things. And next year is going to get better. And remind communities how you have implemented programs to make it better for students already. I think that's really important, is to flip it. Instead of looking at the negative, but look at the positive on it.
And for those of you who will be attending ACSA's Leadership Summit first week of November, if you haven't registered, we'll tell you a little bit more about how you can register. Diana and I will be doing workshops on the assessments on the California School Dashboard. That is coming up at ACSA's Leadership Summit in San Diego first week of November. We'll tell you a little bit more about how we register or how you can get registered for that. Diana, I have to say, I mentioned assessments and I mentioned Leadership Summit, not because of what Jeff Oakes has said over in the comments section, but Jeff has a really great idea for some legislative lunch break swag. Now, I've told everybody that if you find me at Summit, I am going to give you a legislative lunch break tchotchke of some type. Just find me and I'll give something to you.
Well, I think you need to sign it for them first too. Like, you can't just give it to them. You need to make sure you sign it, take a photo op.
Something. Yes, actually, that's a good idea. Now, Jeff Oakes says, and I haven't told people what I'm going to be giving out, but he says, my guess is for the legislative lunch break swag at the conference, legislative lunch break embroidered reusable lunch bags. That, Jeff, is the best idea that I have heard of today. So congratulations to you. You know what? That's actually a really great idea.
That's fantastic.
All right, folks, let's go ahead and switch topics over here. Let's talk elections 2022. We've got a couple of experts in the field to talk about the November elections, what you need to know about the candidates, what you need to know about the initiatives. Let's go ahead and bring them on right now. Paul Mitchell is the vice president over at Political Data, and Yvonne Carrillo, ACSA's senior director of policy and governmental relations. Paul and Yvonne, it's so good to have you both here on the show to talk about the November elections. Yvonne, let me start with you. No matter where you go, you're hearing the commercials. You're seeing the commercials about the initiatives, the important propositions that are on the ballot. ACSA's board of directors, as we talked about in this past week's EdCal, have taken some positions on the initiatives. Can you walk us through some of what the board has done and what you're seeing as far as the impact on education?
Yeah, thanks, Naj. Thanks, Diana. I don't have to go anywhere, Naj. It's incredible now that the amount of information that comes through cell phones and just getting texted nonstop about different candidate races and initiatives. But to recap for you, we covered this a few segments ago, but let me recap the positions our board of directors took in terms of propositions. So our board took an opposed position on Proposition 27. To remind you, this is related to online sports gambling. It would legalize sports gambling in the state of California. Our board took an opposed position out of concern about just accessibility that young people would have to be able to engage in sports betting. Proposition 28 is the second initiative that we have a position on, and that's a support position. This one is related to arts and music education. It's estimated this would direct around $1 billion to schools to build out arts and music programs throughout the state. So that one's a support position. And then lastly, our board took a support position on Proposition 31. And Proposition 31 would ban the sale of flavored tobacco products. And that was out of concern for health and well-being and just the predatory market that is just so often targeted at young people in participating in tobacco use and what that leads to. So that's a support position on Prop 31. Additionally, Naj, I'll just mention here briefly, and then I'll drop it here in the chat box, but our board has also endorsed 29 candidates, legislative candidates. And so there was a heavy amount of analysis and scrutiny put on all the races statewide. And these 29 were folks that were clearly aligned with ACSA's values in terms of public education, putting students at the center of all decision making, folks that we felt very confident were going to be really responsive to us at the statewide level, but more importantly to our locals at the local level. So very much encourage you all who are watching to take a look at our ACSA endorsement page so you can see a list of candidates that we've endorsed from your area.
Great. Thanks for the information, Yvonne. Following up on that, Paul, do you have any details or thoughts on how you think Prop 27, Prop 28, and Prop 31 will do this year?
Yeah, so first off, this is a midterm election. So generally gubernatorial elections are lower turnouts. We might see like 56, 60% turnout. You can also see an election like this being really driven by kind of the national issues. The first election after a new party takes power in DC often is a referendum on that power. So we are watching these elections and who's turning out to vote, what issues are driving voters going to the polls this election cycle. And that's going to have a lot to do with the outcome of a lot of races. However, in these three ballot measures, we think that you're probably on the winning side on all of them. The polling that's been done so far doesn't include a lot of polling on all these races. Prop 27, we definitely have seen more polling on. And actually, one of the poll questions we participated in with Capitol Weekly asked people if they'd seen the ads. Your setup was, my God, there's so many ads. 78% of voters have said they've seen the ads for Prop 26 or 27. That's amazing. That's a huge number, something more than you would usually expect to see in a poll. But Prop 27 also in the UC Berkeley poll is only at 27% support. And the real killer in that poll isn't just the support number being low, because you can spend money and try to build support. But the no number is at 53. And generally, if a poll shows early on that a ballot measure is getting into the low 40s in the no, then it's probably dead because of all the undecided voters having a tendency generally to shift to the no. And it's so hard to get people off of a no and convert them to a yes. So the real driver in that number is 53% no. I think that's why the campaign there seems to kind of shut it down in terms of all the spending. Haven't seen much on Prop 28, but I think that's because most people think that that's a slam dunk. And Prop 31 is also seemingly a slam dunk. The no on that ballot measure is only 31%. The yes is 57 in the last Berkeley poll. So that's pretty astounding. And it looks like you guys are going to be on the right side in all three of those measures.
Yeah, I like to hear that we're on the winning side. Paul, I've got two questions for you, but let me ask this one first, because you just mentioned a data point. 78% of those who have participated in the data collection have seen commercials for these propositions. Is that a high number compared to years past? And does that number include not just television, but online, mobile devices, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it includes everything. And in fact, in a poll, I probably would hesitate to put, did you see it on TV or online? Because like, as I'm thinking about it myself, I know that I've seen the ads on my TV that's here in the office, but that TV is really only running streaming services.
Mhm.
And then there's also people are getting hit by ads on Facebook and other kind of online sources. So it was pretty aggressive, the early advertising on those measures. And for a lot of voters, 26 and 27 kind of got thrown together as one thing. So I think that's probably the fate for both of them. But that is really, really high. And this poll was done, about 3 weeks ago, and it was of all likely voters. So pretty astounding number.
Yeah. Folks, if you have questions for Yvonne and Paul, go ahead and put those into the chat. We will tackle those questions near the end of our segment. Paul, let me have us switch over to the legislature. Yvonne talked briefly right at the top of the show about our endorsements, how those endorsements are available. In fact, we've gone ahead and put the document, our endorsement document, into the chat. So if you want to take a look at that, folks, after the show, go ahead and do that. This is the first time a class of legislators with 12-year term limits will not be able to run for re-election. Will this election look a lot different in comparison to others because of that?
Well, first off, the 12-year legislature, or the idea that term limits now is 12 years in either house, that actually first took place in 2012. That was the first year that class was elected. So really, they would have until 2024, but a huge number of them are just bailing ship now. They're either going to higher office or taking jobs in lobbying or outside of the Capitol, or just simply like giving up. So it has been kind of an astounding number of retirements in the legislature, many of which were seats that would have been up in 2024 anyway. So maybe they didn't feel like it was worth it to fight in these new redistricted lines for a seat that they're going to only hold for another 2 years. But either way, we're just having a huge number of retirements, a huge number of vacant seats. It does create opportunities for a lot of change in the legislature. One thing that won't change is that Democrats are going to have a supermajority in both the Senate and the Assembly. This isn't because of a gerrymandering. The lines that are drawn for the state are very fair. In fact, Matt Rexroad, who is one of those prominent Republican redistricting experts in the country, and also a consultant here in California, said that he couldn't draw districts, even if they gave him the power of the pen, that would deny Democrats that supermajority in both houses of the legislature. That's just the landscape in California right now. Now, within that, we might see some interesting races, particularly where there's these Dem-on-Dem races. There are some of these races where you have more of an establishment candidate and then like a much more progressive outsider. And we've seen some surprising results, even this last primary, with voters who maybe are having a lot of discontent with their lives, the what's happening in Sacramento, COVID, education, other things that are homelessness, other things that are agitating them. And so they might have some kind of anti-incumbent sentiment. One of the things we do, and anybody here is welcome to do this as well, we put out a daily email with reports of who's voted so far in this election. And as of this moment, we're at nearly 500,000 Californians have cast their ballots. And so now we can look either statewide or in any legislative district or any congressional district, city or county or council district, even school districts. We can look and say, what's the composition of this electorate? Mm. And the overarching picture is that the votes so far have come in 1 point more Democratic than registration, 1 point more Republican than registration, and the independents are lower, not turning out at the same rate as Democrats and Republicans. That's early, so we don't know if that's going to necessarily mean a lot in the end. Yeah. One point of comparison is in the primary at this point, Democrats were at 6 points over their registration rate. So Democrats in the primary were considerably overperforming their registration. Right now, it's a little bit more flat. Oh, and somebody put the link to the tracker in there, so that's great.
Yeah.
This is a lot of great information, Paul. Thank you. So one of the things you had said too is that the legislature, the Democrats also have a supermajority in the legislature. I'm curious to hear too, though, do you see any other trends happening in the legislature and what the makeup of the legislature will be other than that piece? Maybe like more mods, more Dems, anything else you can share with us?
Yeah, so that is kind of what is at stake right now in the general election is where will that breakdown come? And it's not just important for those individual members, but it might be important for leadership. Remember, we have a speaker that's kind of, the speaker's race is in this nebulous in between phase that we've never seen before, where it looked as though we were going to have a new speaker in Robert Rivas from the San Benito County, Central Coast area. And then Anthony Rendon successfully staved off that attempt, Anthony Rendon from Los Angeles. And it seems as though some of these races have been a little bit of proxy wars for the Assembly Speaker race. And so when we come and see this new class, some of what we'll be seeing is whether or not this is better or worse for one of those potential speaker candidates and what it means for kind of the future of the Assembly in that direction. Same thing, like you said, with moderates versus progressives. The Democratic caucus is large enough right now that it is somewhat made Republicans irrelevant. Not saying this from like a partisan standpoint, just from like an objective standpoint, unless they can pair their votes with moderate Democrats in order to try to stave off some of the more progressive measures. Whether or not that happens now or in 24 or 26, I think that's the median point that we're looking at in our legislature. When I first started working in politics, the median point was literally, is it going to be a Democratic speaker or Republican speaker? Were Democrats or Republicans going to have control? And you might see one or two legislative races really deciding that. Now it's more subjective. It's not like a literal, like which party is going to control the House. It's going to be, will Republicans and moderates have enough control to try to push back? And then even that is not a real clear thing. Sacramento, as you know, has a lot of little internal wars. Like my joke used to be that you could be a vegetarian, gay rights, union member, anti-war activist, but if you support MICRA, you're a mod. And for people who don't know what MICRA was, it's literally just a really arcane law that had to do with malpractice insurance. And so does that mean that that person's going to vote no on a tax increase or going to vote no on a environmental regulation? It didn't, but you get to call yourself a mod. So there's a lot of ambiguity, I think, is the final thing to say, that when we have this new legislature come in, we might not know until they actually start voting really kind of what the temperature is.
Yeah. Again, folks, if you have questions for Yvonne or Paul, go ahead and put those into the chat. Gail, I saw yours. We'll tackle that coming up in just a moment. Yvonne, you heard what Paul had to say about trends. How will this affect ACSA's advocacy moving forward?
Yeah, the piece that Paul hit that I think will affect our advocacy most is the amount of turnover that we're going to see in this legislative cycle. There's going to be so many new legislative members, and so with that, it certainly provides opportunity. But there's going to be a knowledge gap come day one as it relates to education policy and these really big concepts, policies, budgetary decisions that have been implemented over the last number of years. Just the whole concept of local control funding formula, the accountability. I mean, you name it, all these things that are bread and butter that have such major effects on education and the work that you all do. There's going to be a need to really focus on getting back to the basics and making and educating the new crop of legislators on policy decisions that have been made, on how these things impact your schools and your communities, impact your students. So a lot of the focus in terms on the advocacy side is going to be certainly getting in there early, building relationships. And so encourage you all to be conscious of that as you're navigating your local communities, but also bringing it down as well and talking about these really complex, some of which are really complex educational policies and budgetary items on a much simpler scale, and reminding folks of where we're at and how we got here.
Great. Thanks, Yvonne. And overall, do you think this is an important year for election year for school administrators?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I think every election is important, honestly, and they all have really big consequences on the work that we do and the kids that we serve and the adults that we employ and serve as well. But certainly, I think because of redistricting and all the new legislative boundaries, maps, certainly because of the amount of new members that are coming into office, I think one can make the argument that maybe there's a heightened level of importance on this election. So please vote. Certainly, I think it starts with all of us, and we were joking internally earlier that it's so easy, right? We get our mail and ballots. All of a sudden, they're under a stack of other mail, and they sit there for the next couple weeks, and then scrambling at the tail end to fill them out. So encourage you to fill those out and to cast your vote as early as possible. But yeah, there's a lot of really important stuff on the ballot. I mean, we talked about that at the front end in terms of the initiatives that we took positions on. These are things that will directly impact the health and well-being of young people. This will impact the amount of resources that are available to school communities to build out things that are critical to student success. And then certainly you're going to have statewide officers and legislators, again, that are going to be making decisions that really impact your school communities as well. So yeah, this election is really important, to say the least.
It's funny, Yvonne, that you said that about the ballots getting lower and lower in the pile. I think a lot of that has to do with all of the flyers that are coming out from the initiatives and the candidates out there. Hey, Gail Olson asks this question: when a proposition fails, how long must the backers wait to introduce it again? I'll have either one of you jump in with an answer for that.
I can just say that there is no real rule other than the fact that they have to go through the whole process of getting signatures and put it back up for the next general election. You can't put signature collected ballot measures statewide on a primary anymore. The legislature can put it on the primary, but the process of collecting signatures and putting a proposition up has to be on now a general election ballot. And then, of course, the legislature can call special elections and determine whether or not ballot measures would go on them. So the legislature could kind of do it every election if they wanted to. They could put ballot measures up. You'll see one of the ballot measures on the ballot, the dialysis measure, is now on the ballot for the third time. And there's nothing stopping them from putting on a fourth time.
Yeah.
Hey, let me just ask, Paul, because you made mention of it earlier. The television that is in your office there, and you said that it was streaming. Now, I know that you were eating lunch right before you came on with us. What's on your TV, or what was on your TV?
Well, this isn't going to excite many people, but what was on my TV was the World Cup cycling velodrome races from Paris that were last week. So not many people are going to be as into cycling as I am, but
hey, as long as you can find the programming on the streaming service,
you
right?
can get it's amazing how much you can get streaming nowadays. I can watch poker and cycling like never before.
Yeah, absolutely. Yvonne Carrillo, ACSA Senior Director of Policy and Governmental Relations, and Paul Mitchell, Vice President at Political Data. Both of you, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an honor to have you here, and we look forward to talking with you next time.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
We are just past the bottom of the hour here. I want to remind you, Leadership Summit coming up first week of November in San Diego, as we talked previously Diana will be talking about assessments in one of the workshops. I'll be talking about community engagement related to the assessments during another workshop. Here's a preview of ACSA's 2022 Leadership Summit. Yes, don't miss ACSA's Leadership Summit in San Diego this year. For registration, you can go to ACSA.org or ACSA.org/professional-learning. I will be there. Diana will be there. Cast of thousands. Edgar will be there signing autographs, I'm sure, at Leadership Summit. You don't want to miss that. That's coming up first week of November. Diana, it's been great having you here on the show. I think things went better today than when Edgar's in the seat. So we'll make sure that we'll make sure that you're in the rotation.
Well, thank you so much. I hope so, but I'd like to hear from the fans. I don't know if they would agree.
Yeah, no, I'm sure the fans are more than happy to have you over here. Thank you, folks, so much for joining us on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Remember, we are live and interactive Wednesdays here at 1 p.m. on ACSA Facebook and ACSA YouTube. Have a great rest of the day and rest of the week, and we'll see you next time.